Canada is now set to promote and expand access for their citizens to physician-assisted suicide, following actually a Supreme Court decision there that sort of overturned the notion that it could be blocked. The Supreme Court found that physician-assisted suicide, at least, should be accessible to all individuals. It shouldn't be able to be blocked based on, the province that you live in. Now, there are some sort of stipulations here, and we see these in the certain states within the U.S. that also have physician-assisted suicide. We'll get back to the places where it's legal, but the stipulations are that you cannot have a serious medical condition, and also, more importantly than that, you can't undergo what Canada is referring to, and other nations are too, as suicide tourism. Mm-hmm. This is apparently a real phenomenon because individuals where it's not legal in their country to either have death with dignity, however you define it, physician-assisted or pure euthanasia, will go to countries where it is legal and they'll kind of do the deed there. So a lot of countries are trying to figure out how to block that from happening, and this new law actually has this kind of intended consequence, but for some people a kind of bummer unintended consequence, which is that they're going to be blocking Americans from being able to utilize the law.
And we see this basically in any form of medicine. If it's plastic surgery, if some places it's cheaper because the regulations are lower, or if drugs are cheaper. Like, if you have something that's required for your life, especially if it's health related, and it's very expensive to begin with, people will travel abroad to seek it out. This is an issue that, I don't know, it's awkward to talk about, as you implied in your intro. It's like talking about abortion. Like, people on both sides get uncomfortable because of the very nature of it.
I love talking about abortion.
It's the funnest. It's the best. Maybe we'll talk about it in this hour. But like, maybe this is one of the positions where I guess I'm a libertarian on. As uncomfortable as it is, and look, I've never known anyone who actually committed suicide. I've known people in my family who've attempted it, and if they had succeeded, it would have been devastating. And all of that is true socially. I don't see what place the government has in any way to stop people from doing it if they want to do it.
Well, it just feels a lot like enforced morality.
That's what it feels like, yeah.
And that's not really your place to do. This reminds me a lot of the Brittany Maynard story. She was a woman. She had stage 4 glioblastoma, and she wanted to take her own life and die because she knew that her disease would definitely kill her and there was no way out of it. And she did eventually take her own life, I think through barbiturates prescribed from her doctor. And it seemed like the best way for her to choose to live out the remainder of her own life.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's a little silly that it's against the law, considering that the person who is actually often doing it can't feel the ramifications of that breaking the law. The problem is the physicians can, and the physicians in certain areas can go to prison, can be fined. Family members can go to prison for this, even though it's the wishes of their family member.
Yeah.
It's interesting because I think that we're starting to have an enlightened view of death with dignity across the globe. Now I think is a good time to actually pull up that graphic. You can see all of the different countries where death with dignity are legal. And some of these, they qualify it as assisted suicide, and some that qualify it as euthanasia, because in certain countries you actually require a physician to do it. But we've got Switzerland, Germany, Albania, Colombia, Japan, the Netherlands, Belgium. Now within the U.S., we've got Washington, Oregon, Vermont, Montana, and of course, we just saw legislation passed right here in California that hasn't been enacted yet, but it has passed. And it hasn't been enacted yet in Canada. The vote hasn't even passed yet, but it does look like now that Trudeau is in power, now that the Liberal Party has a majority there, that it will likely go through.
Another thing that bothers me about this is that we think we're having one debate when we're really having a different one. The debate between whether we can make it illegal to kill yourself is fake. That's not what we're having. You can't stop a person from killing themselves. You can only stop them from doing it in a clean, pain-free way. If I want to kill myself, as I go about my day, there's 1,000 different ways that I can do it. That will be painful, that might lead to me simply being maimed, that might lead to medical expenses for my family, that might traumatize my family. You can't stop a person from doing any of those things. You can only legally stop them from having a pain-free, dignified death.
Yeah, it's perfectly acceptable and legal for you to go into a gun shop and purchase a gun with which you plan to commit suicide, but it's not legal, not yet in California, not in most places across the country, for you to get a prescription from a doctor that is known to be a lethal prescription. And It is a complicated issue, especially when it comes to individuals who are suffering from mental illness, individuals who may not be in a position to make a clear decision about whether or not suicide is in their best interest if they're not outside of the active episode that they're experiencing. But many places that have assisted suicide laws on the books allowing it, I think, are still too stringent because they require, just like you were referencing, oftentimes you have to have a fatal illness. You have to have a note from your doctor that says that you're likely to pass away within something like 6 months. There's usually an arbitrary line in the sand. For me, I think that line is kind of too far in one direction. I think for everybody, though, there is a line, right? There's got to be a line. We euthanize our pets, and we see that as a moral imperative. When we have a dog or a cat that's suffering and they're in a lot of pain, we actually think it's immoral not to put them down. And that's an organism that can't tell us what their wishes are.
Yeah, I think there's a social line. I think that if families want to put pressure on someone to not do it, I think that's totally fine. If doctors don't want to be forced to do it because they think that a person could be temporarily mentally distraught or something like that, then I think they should be fine to do that. But at the end of the day, I just don't see what right we have. You don't have a right, the government doesn't have a right to stop you from ruining your life. We can ruin our lives in all sorts of ways, and it's the family and friend that's supposed to stop you from going into a horrific relationship, starting into a career that you're going to fail in. Like, those sorts of things that can ruin your lives or end your life, that's what family and friends stop. It's not the government's job to tell you, no, you have to keep living.
Well, and in most examples in which assisted suicide has been legalized or allowed, and in most examples that we see that individuals do die with dignity, it's not a life ruiner. It's because they're in absolute, utter pain.
Agony,
it's because, they're in agony and this is the best way out. And so the idea that I would be able to put and of course this is the general my religious view, this is a purely religious issue. We know that it is. This is legislating morality from a fundamentally religious place. And I think that we have to move past doing that. And I would actually push you one step further and say, I don't think that it should be okay for a doctor to say that he won't administer this medication unless there is some sort of qualification that, yes, there is a mental instability and basically the parameters in which you can prescribe aren't there. But I think this is the same as a doctor trying to say that he's not going to give me my birth control. I don't care what your religious beliefs are. You respect the fact that I don't have them. I'm a human being and I deserve this kind of respect.
I think we can have that debate. I mean, I think there's all sorts of different types of doctors. I'm not sure that every doctor should be forced. Like, if you're a podiatrist,
I agree.
Sure should be forced to euthanize a person. But some doctors, sure. Like, well, normally I'm a dentist for children, but sure, I'll pump you full of this.
Thanks for bringing levity into the conversation.
Not everything has to be dour.
Well, let's take it back down. Nah.
Kim, no. But I mean, I am interested. So does it seem like here on the panel we all kind of agree with this kind of legislation?
I don't think committing suicide is something people flippantly, like a decision they just go like, oh, I'm going to kill myself. Fuck it. Like a lot of the times we hear about abortion, like, oh, women will just go around getting all these abortions all the time. And it's not a decision you make because you love abortions. It's because there's something fundamentally wrong that you need to take control of with your own life and your own body and make that decision yourself.
Yeah. And now I think it's also important that we're very clear here that we are obviously not advocating for suicide.
Of course, no.
And that there are plenty of examples in which individuals who might think that this is the best option haven't looked at all of the options available. And so, of course, I do think it's important that if you are having questions about this, that you seek out a suicide prevention hotline and learn what all of your options are. That being said, I think that this is a fundamental human right. This is a civil right. It's about dying with dignity. And I am an advocate for allowing that within the legislature. It's almost one of those things where I just don't think there should be laws that prevent people from doing things that are fundamental to them.